Hello and thank you to everyone who is joining us from around the planet today. If you've gone through the attendee list, you see we have a very robust representation of both the ag and the cyber security world. So thank you for coming and spending some time with us today. My name is Andrew Rose, and I am the Director of Innovation, Strategy, and Development at Mid-Atlantic Farm Credit. And for those of you who are not familiar with Farm Credit, we're an agricultural bank. A fun fact, I'm also one of the founders of the Cybersecurity Association of Maryland. So I have a deep understanding both of the cyber world and the agricultural world. About 15 months ago, we started this process to have the words cybersecurity and agriculture put together in the same sentence. And some people looked at us a little askance when we started this process, but everyone understood that this was critically important. And with Lieutenant Governor Rutherford's opening remarks this morning, obviously we've achieved this milestone and we're very excited about that. And it's clear that Maryland leads the way in CyberAg. The flag has been planted and it is now unfurled. And keep in mind, we're talking about cybersecurity for the most part today here, but that is not the only threat that we need to be aware of. We also need to be vigilant for insider threats, theft of business intelligence and other organizational crown jewels, as well as a multitude of other scenarios. At our past December CyberAg Symposium, we brought Joseph Moresco in, and Joseph represented the intelligence community. I view their role in this as sort of the radar that is always scanning the horizon for threats. And today we're going to feature the FBI. And as you're going to hear in a minute, the FBI is not here to assign blame to the farmers who've been attacked. Their role is to impose risk and consequences on those threat actors, as well as identify trends when possible to inform and mitigate future attacks. If you could, please put your questions and comments in the chat box, and we're going to compile those and address them as appropriate. And we've also included specific FBI resources under the additional information tab on the website. Now, to get some insights into some of the active threats that growers in the Delmarva region are dealing with right now, it is my pleasure to introduce Kyle Waggoner, the Director of Information Services for Perdue Farms, as well as our friends at the FBI.
Thank you, Andrew, and appreciate it and look forward to this conversation with the FBI. Mike, we'll go ahead and start the conversation.
Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Waggoner, Director of Cybersecurity, Perdue Farms. Welcome to the CyberAg Symposium. Glad to have you here this afternoon. We have our friends from the FBI joining us to have a conversation that I'll be moderating around threats and cyber attacks in the food and agriculture industry. So thank you for joining us. We have David Ring with us, as well as Thomas Breeden from the FBI. Gentlemen, would you mind introducing yourself real quickly before we get started?
Sure. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for having us on here. My name's, like you said, David Ring. I'm the section chief of the FBI Cyber Division's Cyber Engagement and Intelligence section. What we do there is handle cyber criminal intelligence matters, as well as our private sector engagement program. So a pretty varied portfolio, and I hope that brings a little something to this conversation.
Fantastic. And Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. My name's Tom Breeden. I'm a supervisory special agent of cybercrime based out of FBI Baltimore, and I'm super excited to be here. Talking with y'all in the agriculture sector. Agriculture is actually close to my heart. I was an agriculture major in college, and somehow I ended up here in cybersecurity with FBI. We can talk about that at a different time, but super excited to be here and talk about cybercrime and the threats to cybercrime.
Appreciate it. Thank you. And likewise, being myself, Nation Shore, agriculture is a big part of our industry, and working for Perdue and Perdue Foods, something that, when we look at cyber, now these things are coming together where there are actually cyber attacks targeting these specific industries. It's not just tech companies that have these problems. It is actually agriculture, food businesses. And so I really appreciate your time today. And I just had some questions that I think is from the broader audience that we probably need to have this conversation. And what stemmed this and brought it to light for me was a bulletin that the FBI released back in October of 2020, so not that long ago, saying that there was an uptick in cyber attacks. And one of the use cases that was shared was there was an actor that targeted, and this is actually mid-December of 2020, so just not too far ago, where an actor targeted and impersonated a CFO of a company, asked for their account receivables customer list, about $15 million of accounts receivable, then went out and solicited those customers and told them, hey, by the way, we've changed our bank vendor. You need to now send payments to this vendor, and impersonated that also with just a very similar lookalike domain. You know, this sounds kind of far-fetched, like, would this really happen to me? I'm just a farmer, I'm just a small business, you know, maybe you're Perdue, maybe you're Tyson, maybe you're just a small private a family farm business. I mean, how likely are these attacks occurring, and what is some of the impact that we're seeing for some of these individuals and companies when it comes to impersonation scams like this?
Yeah, so you know, this type of fraud and fraud as a whole is something that everybody can fall victim to. And when we talk about fraud in the cyber realm, we talk about a lot of different things, but business email compromise is kind of what we're referring to here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. For those who aren't familiar, the Internet Crime Complaint Center is ic3.gov is a website where individuals and businesses can report these types of attacks and efforts. And so just last year in 2020, the IC3 reported about 20,000 business email compromise reports. So those are individuals reporting those, or businesses reporting those types of attacks to them in 2020 at an adjusted loss of over $1.8 billion, right? So common is the phrase that I would use to describe it. And when it comes to the targets to those types of attacks, most people think, you know, they're going to be going for, you know, so-called big fish, right? Like really large organizations that have a lot of money, but in reality, you know, cyber criminals seek out targets of opportunity, and oftentimes those mid and small companies tend to be, you know, opportunistic targets for these folks.
I think one thing, Kyle, the question I have always that the FBI has when a victim makes this type of complaint to us, or the victim has this question, is how did they do it, right? How did they impersonate my boss, or how did they impersonate a customer or a company we're working with? And maybe today we can kind of demystify that a little bit. I think at times it seems magical to people that, oh, the cyber criminals are everywhere, there's nothing we can do. And it's just not true. I think first off, I would say cyber awareness, it really starts at the CEO level. It starts at the boss of the company, and it goes down to the employees, and it goes all the way down to every employee. And so let me talk about one way that scheme you described could have been executed. Hackers today, they've moved away from using those alerting email services, those foreign email services that clearly come from a foreign country. What they're going for today is using perhaps an email service based in the U.S., and they're sending blanket emails to people in organizations, and there's no malware. It's nothing sophisticated in the sense of malware, but they're tricking you, and they're saying, hey, this is important company information. If you want to see this information, log on to your Microsoft 365 account, and you can see that information. So a lot of people in that, if they can masquerade as a company you're already working with, or masquerade as just a trusted entity, when you log in to see that document, it'll ask for your credentials, and often people will put in their employee credentials, and that's all they needed. That's all they needed to get your credentials. Now, what happens next? Again, it's not magical. They have access to the account, and often what we see is they put in one forwarding rule. So what that means is they add a rule to the inbox account that says every email you get or you send, also send it to this account. And that account they put it to is a hacker-controlled account. And then they get out. They're out. And they sit and they wait. And so the scary part is how patient they can be at times, where they will watch and they will watch communications. And this all the time it's being forwarded out to an external email address, forwarded out. And then when the time is right, they will, what we call they'll hijack that communication and they'll come in with a change. And this is the business email compromise. They're compromising that business email. They'll hijack communication. They'll say, instead of the bank account previously provided, send it to this new bank account. And it's, who knows, it doesn't matter where it's based, it's a bank account. And it looks like it's coming from the person you're already corresponding with. Again, what I've described there is not elaborate. It's using a web application from Microsoft. It's using US-based email addresses. But if they can pretend to be from that vendor you're already working with, that's all they need. And that money goes out the door. So a good case, a good ending to maybe a story like that, though, is if, as Second Chief Ring mentioned, if someone falls victim to that, they report that information to IC3. I mean, I can't give you a percentage, but oftentimes the FBI can freeze those funds. We can stop those funds sometimes before they leave the US, and even sometimes overseas. We can stop those funds. So it's not dim, it's not completely dim and dark outcomes. But it's real, and sometimes it's not magical. Sometimes it is tricks. It's just tricks sometimes that the users of customers, people in payroll, people in contracts, some of those awareness of that can make a big difference and can stop these frauds from happening.
Tom, one thing that you mentioned is going overseas. Are you finding that these are largely other countries, other nation states that are basically targeting U.S. businesses, or are we seeing this also within the U.S. as well? I mean, who are the people behind these particular attacks?
That's a really good question. There are U.S.-based actors. There are overseas actors. It's hard to always say, again, give percentages, but we certainly know U.S. individuals can be involved in these schemes. I think often the originator of the scheme is based overseas. West Africa, Eastern Europe are hubs for this type of thing. So yeah, I would say global, but there are domestic actors as well.
So you mentioned the business email compromise, and one of those ways is basically just basic, what we call social engineering, just communicating to someone, hoping they fall. You know, it's the old, hey, your car warranty, you need to call back this number or provide your credit card, and they take that payment. But here we're seeing it specifically with someone impersonating, gathering information from the company, and then saying, hey, by the way, the invoice needs to be directed. The payment for the invoice needs to be basically redirected to another bank account. And what happens is the customer that's paying doesn't realize they're not communicating with the legitimate company, and the actual legitimate company doesn't know that it's out of band. So both parties don't know that there's some fraud going on until what might happen is, hey, you're late on your payment. Where is it? And they say, oh, I paid 2 weeks ago. You told me it was a new bank account number. And you'll say, well, that wasn't me. I never told you that. And the money gets wired to the wrong account, and by then it's long gone. Who's liable at that point for paying the difference, right? I mean, is it the company? Is it the customer? How does that handle?
Yeah, that does get delicate. Often it is where the person that sent the money, especially if their accounts were intruded upon, often it lies there. But it's a circumstance situation. Usually they're obligated to pay those funds at some point. But yeah, that gets kind of complicated in the legal discussion there. But yeah, I think what you're saying is exactly right. And I think probably some of your participants would say, well, I'm going to know the email address of the person is coming from. I should know that. And there's some tricks that hackers use. If you take a W, if you type a W and you type two V's beside each other, those actually they look kind of similar. The same thing with an O and a 0. So if a hacker can, as Secretary Chief Breeden, I think, was saying, if they can set up a domain that looks really similar to a domain where you usually receive emails from, but maybe instead of a W, it's two V's, those are hard to stop sometimes. Those are hard to catch. So that's a one way why they might kind of mirage themselves as someone you usually do business with.
You know, what I've found is even, and that's a great example of someone impersonating through another, we'll say, similar looking address, email address, or web address. Ones that are even more confusing or even complicated is that it's coming from the legitimate address, meaning it is the actual email correspondence and their inbox has been compromised, meaning someone actually has their login to their inbox. So it's coming from the actual business address. But as you mentioned, there's forwarding rules set up. So the actual owner doesn't know their inbox has been intruded upon. Someone's sending out on their behalf because they're redirecting the sent folder and the inbox folder to say, hey, any correspondence coming from that actor is getting kind of shoved to the side. And the actual email owner doesn't know that someone else is in their inbox. So they're corresponding, reading their messages and intercepting them to say, oh, here's an invoice or a payment. And then we'll go ahead and, send it over here to get wired. And the actual client doesn't know that it's happening. I mean, what would you say in a situation like that? How can someone help prevent some of those kind of attacks where, hey, it's their inbox that's being compromised, and of course they're contributing to the problem because they don't realize that someone is impersonating their own account. And by impersonating, meaning they have access to it.
Yeah, so I mean, we'll talk a lot about this, I think, today, is making sure that everybody has good cyber hygiene. And what we mean by that is taking the steps necessary to protect themselves and their systems, and then down the road protecting their company systems. But specific to this type of business email compromise attack, there are certain technical things that can be put in place. Simple things like marking something as external when there has been a spoof domain name, where you can say, okay, look, that says external, but it's saying it's from this person. Not only does that serve to be a red flag for someone looking at it and saying this isn't right, but then also can notify to greater issues that are potentially out there. But when it comes to some of those deeper issues where someone's inbox has been compromised and it is legitimately coming from an email address where there's not something that's going to flag it for the person on the receiving end of that email being asked to make a payment or move money, human behavior is really important for everybody to be aware of. And it's easy to let your guard down internal to your own organization, especially because these are folks that you're dealing with every day. But because they're folks that you're dealing with every day, you tend to have an idea of how they talk, how they write their emails now, especially everything being much more virtual, and those types of behaviors, paying attention to your coworkers. And when something seems different, it seems off, it seems out of character, that's the type of thing that everybody needs to pay attention to. And I think back to post 9/11, when there were signs everywhere and broadcasts about, if you see something, say something. If you see something suspicious, say something about it. That applies here in cybersecurity as well, right? And protecting your company from those types of attacks. It's important that if something seems out of character, to not just write it off as, that's a little weird, but anyway, moving on with my day, but actually to follow up on that and take those checks, because worst case scenario, if you guess wrong and it was just them out of character, all you've done is verified something and move on with your day. But if you are identifying an issue, you could really prevent some significant damage to your organization.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And basically what you're telling me is some of these are just some very low technical things. They're not, you don't need some advanced technology. It's more about thinking, questioning and double checking before you go and make that wire transfer payment, or clicking that link in an email, or say, you know what, if you're in doubt, just make a phone call. Like, did you really just send me that email? That seems a little off. The language, the grammatics, something was different about it. Just didn't really seem like the normal correspondence. So really just kind of something anyone can do, right? You don't need to buy something just to say, hey, that's out of the ordinary. Question things, and don't take email for granted. Don't over trust email as, hey, it must really be from John if John sent it. That's what I'm finding out there is email is not a channel of trust. I mean, you can build correspondence, but be very careful about relying on it. Say, yep, they want this, just no questions asked, just kind of return and do what the instructions say. Hey, I know we talked about business email compromise. There's so much more going on in the cyber world as threats in food and agriculture, things such as insider threat, IP, intellectual property theft, AI, social media. Another big one that's come up is ransomware. You know, I think for a lot of the industry, they're well aware of ransomware, but it's evolving, and there are actually specific targets in the food and manufacturing and agriculture sectors. Tell me more about ransomware and what you're seeing, and why should we be concerned about this?
Well, I'll throw another statistic at you from the 2020 Internet Crime Complaint Center annual report, which is available at ic3.gov if anybody wants to take a look at it. It's about 30 pages long, so it's not too bad, but there's a lot in there. It's good information. Monetary losses as a result of ransomware, simply those ransomwares that were reported to us, which represents what I would characterize, without putting a number to it, a very small percentage of ransomware attacks across the country and globally. The monetary loss in 2020 was up 225% from the year before. And what that means is that whether or not the number of ransomware attacks is on the increase, what the ransoms that are being demanded and that are being paid are up significantly from previous years. And there are probably a lot of reasons that we can get into as to why the amounts have gone up. But at the end of the day, ransomware, the word ransom in there's for a reason, right? And it's very, very simplest terms. It is a malicious cyber actor getting into your system and paralyzing it, basically taking it hostage and not releasing it until they're paid. And so it's a significant threat, maybe not in the numbers of instances as things like this as email compromise, but when you talk about from a financial standpoint and from a crippling of your organization standpoint, having a portion of, or in some really bad scenarios, the entirety of your business's capability to operate taken out for a significant period of time can absolutely destroy an organization.
So tell me, why would someone want to plant or attack a agribusiness company with ransomware, or a farmer or grower, or someone in part of the industry? I mean, are they just under the radar? Is this not? I mean, they're really, you see the things in the news, but I mean, are you really seeing it in the smaller organizations? I mean, is this something that they should be concerned about?
The food and agriculture industry is certainly a significant target. And why would somebody potentially target a farmer or a small or medium business when it comes to this industry? Disruption is a significant part of what ransomware actors and criminal and other types of cyber actors are trying to execute. And the reason for that is likelihood in paying a ransom. So if you attack an industry that's critical to the safety and life of a society, it's more critical to pay that ransom in a lot of cases, right? And so that plays an aspect. We see it in this industry. We see it in the healthcare industry, where people are more compelled to pay a ransom quickly because there are significant down the line disruptions to these types of things, even if it seems like a relatively small organization or a relatively minimal impact as compared to maybe a large communications network or something like that. There's access and vulnerability and impact. That's where these guys are going to go. And cyber criminals are extremely opportunistic, and where opportunity lies, they will exploit that. So
Dave, when you mentioned someone would pay the ransom, I mean, what are we talking about? I mean, I've heard high dollars, or cryptocurrency, using Bitcoin. I mean, is this something that's even an option on the table? And after that, I mean, how do we even prevent ransomware? And so, for me and an organization that I work for, we do have a fully staffed security team, but some of the smaller organizations may not be able to have that investment. So maybe paying is an option. or how can they go about preventing some of these things? Could you kind of tackle what you see out there, and what would you recommend?
I think you touched on several questions there. And actually, I think my answer goes back to your scenario of the compromised email inbox. Cyber actors, to them, it's a game of what we call footholds. So it's a game of gaining access to an input, to a computer, and then monetizing that in some form or fashion, right? So if we go back, right, to 2014, I was working cyber, and ransomware back then, CryptoLocker was the first big one. And if some of you all that were in that space, audience, and you, Kyle, probably know that it was a ransomware against host computers. So it would encrypt you would click on the link, the malware, and it would encrypt your computer right there, and it would say pay the ransom, and it would say $600. And actually, employees and companies would pay that and not tell their boss. It's amazing to think they would pay it because they just want to get back to work.
Yeah,
it's interesting. So the evolution of that, it gets quite technical, but in essence, there's so many enterprise management software out there. There's enterprise tools. Systems administrators want to manage their network from one account. They want to manage it from. They want to write one big PowerShell script. They want to do some kind of command that applies a software patch or a software update to the whole network at once. Enterprise management. And so ransomware actors, they do the same thing. So if they can get a foothold, and they can what we call escalate privileges. So if they can get access to that administrator account, then they can use administrative tools. That's what they do. And they apply ransomware across the whole network. And ransomware itself, it's a tool, okay? So it's a crowbar or it's a lock. And locks in themselves are not evil, of course. So it's how this lock is applied and is where it becomes detrimental because they have the key. And that's what it comes back to. So if you're fighting against locks, then you got a problem, right? If you're trying to keep locks out of so you need to keep people out, right? So let's apply that to hackers. You need to keep them from getting a foothold. So that's and this is kind of a discussion possibly more for systems administrators, but it's important for, I think, everyone to know, a small farmer, a small business to know, is that it's kind of back to what you said about email. Every email is actually important because if that email gives a hacker a foothold, they might not encrypt the network at that moment. They might sit and they might wait for an extended period of time. And then after they've navigated from that first computer to the main server on the network, that's when they strike. And again, it's not affecting one computer now. Now it's affecting 50 computers or 10 or 500. They can charge that high demand. When I first started working cybercrime, I think hackers were using Western Union to move money and transfer money. So virtual currency, right, is the choice. Thankfully, you can't buy a house with Bitcoin, thankfully. So they have to still convert it to monetary currency. That's a whole nother threat landscape that we in the FBI are interested in. But that kind of goes back to what's important to us. With ransomware attacks, if we can get artifacts of that, if we can get that virtual currency address, that wallet, we can start linking up attacks, right? If we can get how the hackers gained a foothold in the network, we can start investigating them. If a victim just tells us, hey, we were hacked, we paid $1 million, there's not a lot we can do with that. So it kind of goes, I guess I'm just talking a couple of points here, but I think, and back to your beginning question of, why do they target agriculture industry? It's because people will pay, frankly, because they can't go down. A manufacturing plant, a plant that has, a company that has deadlines, it's tough to go down for 5 days, 6 days, 10 days to call in a cybersecurity firm. But we do not recommend paying the ransom. Frankly, in my opinion, probably I heard somebody say this: if the first few people didn't pay the ransom, maybe we wouldn't be dealing with this right now. I don't know if that's true, but it's an interesting concept. So we recommend not paying the ransom because it furthers the crime.
Yeah, so I mean that's it, and Tom's exactly right. Right, it's the same as any type of hostage type ransom payment. If it's beneficial to the person conducting the attack, then they're going to continue, and if others see how beneficial it is, it'll proliferate, and that's what's frankly happened. All that said, what I would try to message is, if you are a victim of a ransomware attack and you do pay the ransom or are considering paying the ransom, it shouldn't preclude you from calling your local FBI field office or reporting it to IC3, because what Tom had just mentioned about getting those digital artifacts and potentially critical evidence that we could use to identify who the actor was and hopefully move our investigation forward, move towards arrests and prosecutions, are extremely important for us and for the entire community, because the more of these folks that we can identify and potentially take off the map, that's a good thing for everybody. So we would certainly encourage that. And then the other thing that I would say related to prevention standpoint is what Tom was talking about, gaining a foothold, right? And so there are a lot of ways that hackers can do that and eventually inject ransomware into your system. You talked about phishing earlier, right? As a tactic. That's a way that these folks gain a foothold. So emails go out and they're engineered to trick the recipient to believe that they're coming from their organization, or they're coming from some other organization that they regularly get emails from, or a personal friend. And in those emails, they'll have a link that you should click to go somewhere, or a document that you should download. And when you do that, it can trigger a malware that can then inject itself in the system and create that foothold necessary to drop a ransomware down the line. And so the way I describe it is, when you go to well, maybe not these days, but when you used to go to a major event, sporting event or a concert or any of those types of things, or through an airport, every door is a vulnerability. So that's why you see physical security on those doors, and doors that alarm when they open, and an effort to keep bad actors out from doing bad things. Every individual in your organization that has access to any of your systems is a door, right? And so there are not enough sentries to post at all these virtual doors in a lot of cases, and there are ways to minimize it from a cybersecurity technical standpoint. But every individual has to be their own sentinel and watch their own door and make sure that they're paying attention to these things. And how do we do that? And a lot of that really is relying on making sure that there's good cybersecurity and cyber hygiene training at every organization, no matter how big or small, so that every individual is aware of these vectors of entry that can be exploited by cyber criminals and being their own points of protection for your organization.
So we talked a little bit about some of the ways to prevent this. It seems that phishing or email is a common gateway for this happening. So, hey, back to similar to BEC, business email compromise, good email hygiene, not clicking on attachments, knowing who you're corresponding with, not trusting the links that are sent in those emails, because that could deliver ransomware or malware. What about other avenues here? I mean, is there other ways that ransomware can get into an organization? What are some of those ways that, say, farmers or growers or a business should be aware of, besides email?
So a couple other things to bring up is let's say, for instance, you're in a business meeting, or you're having people in your office or on your farm. Those computers, those devices they bring in, everyone needs to be aware of that protecting your company information, but also having a network that a visitor can use. So like a trusted network that only you internally can access, but then have a visitor network. So having those firewalls in place will certainly help. Also, Kyle, and this is probably more to the network administrators who might be on this call, but remote desktop protocol, weak weak passwords in remote desktop protocol are a big vector. So in essence, some of the system administrators in this call might be thinking, well, you should never have that publicly on the internet, and I 100% agree. But the facts is they're out there, and we see ransomware actors compromising remote desktop protocol, weak passwords there, and gaining the foothold. And I think finally for footholds, also we see just not updating systems. So, but slow to patch networks. So when a vulnerability exists, manufacturers and software companies will issue updates and issue patches. If you have a small business, you need to assign someone in your business, or you need to outsource that to have someone manage applying security updates to your networks, to your appliances, because we often I think it was last year we saw, or maybe the year before, we saw a huge use of the Pulse Secure vulnerability, and that's just one. And FBI issued a bulletin on that also. So that's a couple avenues, just sort of the system administrative side of patching, but also everyone can apply the principle of secure passwords. So what I mean by that is long passwords with multiple numbers, letters, and special characters. So if you can apply that, maybe make it a passphrase if you have to, but applying numbers and special characters, what that might do, it might not solve all your problems, but really it might make a hacker go somewhere else. And sometimes that's a win for your company. So some of those basics that every person can do, we highly recommend.
So some great information. Have a strong password. Make sure if you have any internet facing, so things that are accessible from the internet or the public internet, those are locked down. So remote desktop protocol is a way to kind of like a log me in, or some way to get into your network from the outside, that those things are properly locked down, and any vulnerabilities. So, hey, everything's got a vulnerability. Your iPhone, your Android, or your home computer, they all have updates that you get each month, making sure you apply those same patches as well, because a vulnerability is a weakness. It's like a backdoor someone can get into. They don't need a password, so to speak. So passwords, good patching, and of course, keeping an eye on what you click on or download via email. So some really good tips there. So that kind of prevents ransomware, and we'll move on from this. We've got so much more to cover. But if you were to get ransomware, and besides paying the ransom, is there anything else that can be done?
Well,
you don't have a backdoor or special key to unlock it for us?
No, we don't, not yet.
Okay.
That being said, I will say that we, like, it's not total, as I said, like we do a lot of warnings out there, and a lot of there's a lot of doom and gloom, but the FBI has been very successful to disrupting ransomware actors. And I would say that most, there's several out there. The most recent one was the NetWalker group that the FBI disrupted this past year. So I think the last thing I would want to say about ransomware is to, as I think Section Chief Ring was saying here, is we're going to be on your side in the event, and we're not going to treat you as someone. We're not going to come in blaming people. We are focused on the adversary. So that's probably the last thing I'd probably add about it.
And if we hadn't said it before, maintaining secure and independent backup separated from your local system is important, so that you do have somewhere to go if you're on lockdown. You don't lose everything if you don't pay the ransom right away. Yeah,
that's great advice, having a backup, and at least maybe you can get your data back if it's been locked. And I've heard that there's also been extortion attempts now. So if you don't pay the ransom, you do have backups. They might just say, well, you know what, we're just going to dump it to the dark web and give you bad press. Is that fairly common as well?
What that actually spills into, is the intellectual property side of it. So that's the new avenue of ransomware actors, is that it's the double ransom, I think, is what the cybersecurity industry is calling it, is that, exactly. And that's, again, it's a question of the company's got to ask themselves, that information that's out there, how important is that to us? So times we've seen it where hackers, they really didn't know what they were doing, and they exfiltrated information that was of no value. And so the company thankfully could walk away and say, nope, we're restoring for backup, and we're moving on. Other instances, unfortunately, companies have paid. Now, I will say this, there's no guarantee that that hacker will take that information down. Yeah, so I wouldn't take the hacker for their word. So that's another part to consider.
Thanks for sharing that. And you bring up a good point there, intellectual property and insider threats. I mean, tell me more about that. I mean, we'll say insider threat sounds a little nebulous, nefarious, in terms of, well, is there a spy within us? Is there a mole? Is there someone in the organization that's willing to kind of act in that fashion that could get ransomware in or steal intellectual property? Is this really common in the agriculture world or in industry? I mean, is this something that's really just, for some, Boeing or some tech company that's got a lot of R&D or Google, right? What would they want from an agriculture business? So tell me what you're seeing out there.
So I think the theme on some of these, questions on why someone might target an agriculture business is that, there is intellectual property everywhere. So these threats exist everywhere because there's opportunity everywhere, right? And so if you've got information that's valuable, and companies do have information that's valuable, very valuable to them and to industry, and there's competition out there. And so when it comes to an insider threat, if there's somebody that is, there are a couple of different types of insider threats. I guess I'll start there. So you've got a nation state type insider threat where you have a foreign government that if there is information that they're interested in, proprietary information or sensitive information that can help further them in an economic espionage type situation, they'll seek out those organizations to try to steal that from. And you mentioned, defense industrial base type companies where they're dealing with high advanced technologies. They're dealing with sensitive government and classified information. Of course, these foreign adversaries are going to seek those out, but that doesn't exist just in those types of businesses. It exists everywhere, and it doesn't necessarily have to be related to some type of significant defense type situation, because countries are looking to gain an advantage, and the countries that tend to be out in front are places like the United States, right? So we're advancing agricultural technologies that can help other countries move their ways forward, and there are certainly nations out there that are very interested in stealing that technology from us, and so they'll do that through their own citizens moving overseas and getting jobs with these companies, and maybe it starts early or it comes later where that relationship begins, but there's a vulnerability there. The other piece of it is an employee who is not associated necessarily with a foreign government or anything like that, or spy activity, but rather becomes disgruntled, or they have some issue with the company, or they're facing personal issues that puts them in a vulnerable position to be exploited by others, or to exploit the organization that they're working for personal gain. And so that exists everywhere, and most certainly this industry is an extremely important one when it comes to countries such as China or North Korea, or those types of places who oftentimes are struggling to produce food at a greater capacity in a lot of ways, and they are looking for those advantages for their own economy, right, and to move forward. And they are regularly stealing information from U.S. businesses of all kinds for the purposes of using it to gain a competitive advantage globally.
Can you share more about that? For example, what China might steal from the U.S. and can you give an example of an event that's actually occurred? And certainly, I know you can't share names of an organization, but kind of replay some of the details of how it played out and how the FBI responded.
Sure. So, and forgive me if I look like I'm reading from some notes on this. I am, and the purpose of that is we want to get these details right, especially when we're talking about a real example. So, a Chinese citizen was sentenced to 3 years in prison for conspiracy to sell trade secrets from U.S. agriculture companies. The Chinese citizen and 5 others participated in the theft of inbred corn seeds from fields that the companies owned, with the aim of shipping them to a Chinese company. The seeds the Chinese citizen and his co-conspirators targeted were genetically modified to be stronger and enhance desirable traits such as resistance to pests and drought. The Chinese citizen is assessed to be a non-traditional collector, right? So that's an individual whose primary profession is not intelligence collection. And I was referring back to that earlier when I said some people are sent over with the purpose of gaining this information. Other people are coming over for their own legitimate means, but then are co-opted by, in some cases, and in this case, their own government. So a non-traditional collector, and that's someone whose primary profession is not intelligence collection, but who collects sensitive U.S. technologies and information on behalf of Chinese government entities. And in a lot of cases, these folks don't always have a choice in the matter, right, when they're dealing with governments like that. So a Chinese citizen was also the U.S.-based director of a Chinese company that sold seeds through its subsidiary company. Both companies received favorable treatment from the Chinese government as national key dragonhead enterprises, a designation China bestows on select private companies to recognize the significant role they play in promoting China's modernization and development goals. And so stealing U.S. trade secrets and U.S. Technologies of all kinds are certainly at the top priority for a government like China to try to broaden their own development. A U.S. company informed the FBI that it observed this Chinese citizen digging up corn seeds from one of its farms the previous year. So that goes back to the see something, say something piece that I mentioned earlier. That's obviously very suspicious activity. Writing those things off and not reporting them can cause these issues to get worse and worse. And so reporting that to the FBI, like they did in this situation, led us to move forward on an investigation, right? So the FBI learned separately a sheriff's deputy observed the Chinese citizen and two others acting suspiciously at a different farm. In addition, during a visit to another seed producer, the FBI learned company representatives had recently met with the Chinese citizen during a business trip to China. Moreover, the Chinese citizen had visited agricultural supply stores and purchased the U.S. company's seeds without signing the required contracts to purchase the seeds. Once they had acquired the seeds, the Chinese citizen and his co-conspirators attempted to transport them to China by mail and by concealing them in luggage, leaving the United States by airplane and car. Conversations between the colleagues revealed they knew what they were doing was illegal. Although the Chinese citizen was sentenced to 3 years in prison, the U.S. company estimated the theft would result in the loss of 5 to 8 years of research and at least $30 million. Developing a single inbred seed can cost $30 to $40 million in laboratory testing and can take over 7 years to develop, right? And so that's what we mean by stealing to gain a competitive advantage. That's a significant amount of money and time to invest to develop that. Why do it if you can just jump on a plane and steal it from somebody else? And that's something that we've seen over and over again, and it's not limited to 5G technology or other energy and things like that. It is every industry, and this is a significant one. You see the amount of money and time that government was able to save by exploiting this technique.
So how would you identify someone that might be involved in type of intellectual property theft or working with a foreign country to basically steal trade secrets? I mean, this seems like something that would be hard to detect. I mean, there's not as we look at cyber attacks, this isn't an email, this isn't necessarily antivirus or ransomware. This is human behavior, and how do you mitigate this? What are your thoughts?
Yep. So insider threats are not specifically just a cyber issue, right? They're a whole of organization issue, and savvy actors will try to take advantage of every piece of that. So in this case, we did identify a few things, and as I kind of read through that narrative, unauthorized access, right? The individual is digging up corn seeds in a field that, I get I don't know if this is exactly how it happened, but I of course get the image in my head of a guy out in the field in the dark with a flashlight trying to dig this stuff up. And, that type of access, trying to gain access to something that you don't have a natural need to know or to have access to is certainly going to be an indicator. That leads into suspicious activity, right? So a field manager noticed a Chinese citizen and two others acting suspiciously at different farms. Suspicious activity can mean a lot of different things, and we'll talk about a little bit what some of those indicators might be. But noticing it and saying something about it and reporting it are incredibly important. bypassing regulations and policies. They purchased the U.S. company seeds without signing the required contracts. There are a lot of reasons to bypass regulations and policies, but nefarious reasons are among them, and it's something that we need to pay very close attention. That's why it's very important to make sure that we are following those regulations and policies otherwise, so that it makes it easier to identify those who don't. Taking sensitive material without authorization. That goes back into the unauthorized access thing, but now they're taking it and doing something with it. That's weird, right? Like, you're taking your work home with you in a very, very different way in that scenario, and folks that are trying to access that and asking those questions, how do I gain access to it, or where, do you have this, or those types of probing things that don't seem to have a legitimate reason, are huge indicators, right? And so there are a few different indicators to insider threats that I can walk through. So working odd hours without authorization, bragging about what somebody knows, being sponsored by a foreign country to study in the U.S. and then planning to return to the home nation with new technical knowledge, requests to obtain sensitive information without a need to know, I mentioned that, inappropriately seeking sensitive information from others, taking sensitive material home without authorization, bringing recording devices without approval into work areas where they shouldn't have those, unnecessarily photocopying or downloading sensitive material. I think we're probably beyond the photocopying stage in our technological progression as a society, but downloading and stealing digital media are something that we need to pay attention to. Short trips to foreign countries for unexplained reasons, displaying unexplained affluence, right? So, and this is not necessarily a nation state example as much as a personal, somebody who's doing it for their own personal gain. All of a sudden they show up in that new car where everybody knows that they probably shouldn't be able to afford it. Taking numerous photos of booths and presentations at conferences, and unreported foreign contacts or conducts unreported foreign travel. So these are things that maybe individually aren't necessarily going to always be this type of insider threat activity, right? And so we need to make sure that we're careful about what we're observing and how that keys into everyday normal behavior. But as we see 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these things start to build up without a good reason, that's where we really, really need to take notice, because the earlier we can prevent, the better off that we're going to be in stopping this activity from happening.
So a couple questions for you. Have you noticed an uptick in this type of activity since people have begun to work from home more frequently due to the COVID? And so, hey, there's more isolation, less oversight, or people being in an office environment, so they might feel a little bit more at liberty to make some of these maneuvers. So is that something that you've seen?
I think that the COVID remote environment has led to many more, let's say, put it this way, an increased attack surface area, right? So that basically means that there are more opportunities, especially in the cyber side of things, because you're not physically in your office, in your building, on your organization systems directly as often. You're having fewer face-to-face meetings, and that leaves more of those doors open for folks to get into. Specific to insider threats, I can't necessarily say that we're with data that we're seeing an increase. From a COVID standpoint, less physical access oftentimes can mean less access to information, but increased remote access can also mean increased access to information that somebody could obtain without having to, physically go somewhere and for someone to see them. So it can go in both directions. But from a remote environment or a physical environment, it's extremely important to pay attention to these things and making sure your folks are trained to be aware of this stuff. And it's not surprising, right, that the FBI would have insider threat training that we all have to take every year, so that we're able to recognize these insider threats given the work environment that we're in. But just because it's not a national security type environment doesn't mean it's not extremely important to make sure that everybody in your organization can understand the threats that the whole organization faces, so that they can identify and report when it happens.
And I
think, go ahead, Tom.
Kyle, I just really agree with what Section Chief's Ring is saying here. I think it's just like cybersecurity, intellectual security, economic security. It really needs to be baked in to the organization so that from day one, the employees are hearing about it. When you start the beginning of business talks and business deals, though, not that there's a silver bullet to stop it, but if you, again, like cybersecurity, if you layer it with a non-disclosure agreement, right? If you really think about the need to know, like in the example we gave of the economic espionage of the corn seed, did that individual really need to know where those corn trials were? Did he really need to know all the details of that? And I won't go back and rehash the case, but we know, right? It's a balance, because the developer of the seed, we all drive by those road signs. We drive by the road and we see that marker out there, variety 158-2, right? It's a branding, and that's important to the organization. But can they balance that with the business relationships they start? Can they balance that with the need to know side? So it needs to be baked in from the beginning. It's hard to, but if you're trying to fix it after it's happened, no one wants to be in that spot. So I would encourage the small businesses, the farmers, the agriculture industry to start now with these challenges, start solving them now before they pop up.
Yeah. So one of the things I heard you say is kind of a cultural thing. It's being educated, being aware, questioning. Hey, if you see something, say something. And as we try to tie this back to what you're seeing in the FBI, I mean, at what point would someone say, all right, we think we have an issue here, we need to call the FBI, or do they not? Do they call the local law enforcement and say, hey, we think there's someone here that might be involved in trying to steal intellectual property, or they call the FBI? I mean, how much information do you need for someone just, before you can get involved, right? Is there kind of a threshold for that?
Well, we would have certainly want to talk to anyone that wants to provide information about a possible crime. So please call us. It's one thing, information for us. One question of how do we receive the information? It's another question of how do we act on that information? So when we have evidence of a crime, we very well may act on the information. If we just have reporting or suspicions, we want to know that, but I wouldn't say for sure we would act on it. It's just it's a question of how serious is it? I think the fact that the entity knows their knows their crown jewels is a big step, because that means they know something that's important to them, and that's a starting point for us. If they protected their crown jewels to some extent, then it shows it's important, and then we can say, okay, that person took overt criminal acts to obtain those crown jewels. That's a great case for us. We can present that, and that's a good one. It's a lot harder when there's been no effort made to protect the information.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If it's all on the internet or it's all out there, it gets a lot harder for us to say that someone took criminal acts to obtain it. So it's important to protect that information and to have communication with us.
That's great. If you have trade secrets or intellectual property, you have to treat it as such. I mean, if you're posting it to the internet for everyone to see, then it's kind of hard to say someone is stealing it, because you're giving it away, or you're not treating it like it's any different than normal email communications or paperwork that you're filing. So that's a good way to say, hey, what are you doing to protect it? So you do have to be conscious about that. And that's certainly in the cyber realm, as we look at a risk-based approach. We don't treat all data the same. We say what's most important, knowing that resources are finite. So where we focused our effort. And so an insider threat is, hey, how do we focus on protecting that IP and identifying and making sure only the right people have access to it? I know we got a couple more things to cover here with the time. Tell me about AI and social media manipulation. I mean, this seems a little bit newer than some of the traditional threats that we've seen. Talk to me more about this and what you're seeing, and why is this important to talk about today?
Yeah, so I think folks have kind of talked about artificial intelligence and synthetic content, and it's kind of generally referred to in the media and other places as deep fakes. It's kind of been referred to as a future threat, but I think we're learning that it's a current threat. And so there are a lot of different reasons why this is important. And so when we talk about fraud, which is really what we've been talking mostly about in this conversation, somebody trying to trick somebody else so that they can gain access to their sensitive information or their money. Artificial intelligence and the development of synthetic content, which at its base is video, audio, photographs that are manipulated or created completely from scratch to appear like they're a person or real content when it's really not at all real content. The goal there is to trick somebody in a lot of cases by these actors, right? And so that technology, one, is becoming more and more easily accessible by folks who have less technical capability to exploit and use. And it's going to be applied to criminal behavior, right? Because what have criminals done since the dawn of crime has been they've looked at the new technologies and the new ways to be able to gain an advantage and further their criminal efforts. This is no different than that, right? It's another tool for them to try to defraud an organization and try to trick folks into giving them what they want. There's another piece of it that we've seen potentially coming down is the creation of synthetic video content used potentially to harm an organization, right? And so this really will apply to folks that have a lot of audio, video, and imagery out on the open internet that anybody can access, because these technologies require sample data to be able to kind of create and manipulate an existing person into a video, into an audio, into a conversation that they've never had, that oftentimes will say things that that could reflect very negatively on an organization or that individual, and that can be used to try to injure that organization one way or another, if it's before an initial public offering or something like that, where we see that could be a potential threat as that happens. And often cases, right, the most important people or the individuals who represent an organization, they're out there in that media and that content exists, where these folks can create that synthetic content that can be used to leverage against the organization. Would I say that it stacks up today in the same way that the other threats that we talked about do? I wouldn't say that, but it's important to know that it's out there and potentially exists. And there's information. Actually, the FBI put out an advisory in the past, I think, month or so on deep fakes and synthetic content that gives some tips and things on how you can potentially identify what is synthetic content and what's real content. It's growing harder and harder as the technology improves to identify it. But there are some tips out there that can be leveraged to potentially identify it. But really, at the end of the day, it's just another potential tool for a criminal actor to further their activity and potentially defraud an organization.
So, Cal, I think about one of the recommendations we make, right, to prevent the business email compromise. When a hacker says, "Oh, change the bank account information to this new bank account," we say, okay, to prevent that, have an out-of-band communication with the original person that sent that, a telephone call or a means. I think what Section Chief Ring is saying here is, what if that response on the telephone call is actually the voice of the CEO or of the person, but it's used ML or AI to generate that voice? That's another threat. We've not seen it yet. It very well may be on the horizon, but it's that'll be a different discussion.
The more you can train the folks in your organization to try to verify information that they're coming in before they take action, the better equipped they are to identify when things are real and when they're not. Of course, there are going to be efforts down the line and that are currently, being exploited to try to make that harder for folks to identify. But it's a lot easier to start from a relatively advanced point in training and knowledge of your staff and your employees, where they're able to identify these things and they know that they should be verifying and identifying before they take action. It's a lot easier to get to that next level of being able to identify when you're already at an advanced starting point than then you're 10 years behind in the process. So it's important to know about, but it doesn't fall into the category of the current significant vector that we're seeing in other cases.
Yeah, certainly. And you mentioned some tips. I mean, how do I know that this isn't a deep fake right here and that I'm being played and this is, I'm on like candid camera or something, right? Like, how do I know it's you guys talking to me? I mean, this is some really advanced artificial intelligence, machine learning, and simulations that you might not even know. You think you're actually talking to them. So we're not impersonating email. We're synthesizing realistic voice and video and facial recognition or interaction. I mean, that's kind of scary to think about. I mean, what were some of those tips to say, well, how do you know you're not talking to a robot that is impersonating you right now?
One, these types of interactive conversations today would probably be pretty hard for someone to synthetically generate a reactive type deep fake. So making sure that you're having live conversations that don't sound, especially if it's a phone thing that it doesn't sound recorded, that's really important. Having those direct contacts, some of the same things, that we mentioned before when we said pick up the phone and call somebody and call them at a number that is their number, or when we're back in normal times, walk over to their office or their desk, or have that separate contact that isn't a kind of natural everyday occurrence where it can be exploited through someone who recognizes what those routines are and can try to manipulate them.
Good. And it sounds like in those situations, also picking up on the language and the response. Is this typically how they talk and their mannerisms and the flow of the conversation? So when you know someone, you kind of got a sense for their personality and how they interact. And if it suddenly looks right, sounds right, looks like it, but it doesn't sound right, just like you see in the email, hey, that's normally not how they reply. They usually use a explanation, and they use commas and grammar, and everything seems to be a little bit more tighter. And here it's a little bit more choppy, that it's something seems off. So take that second to take another look. So what about social media manipulation? Certainly this has a lot of implications. I know a lot of businesses use social media. I mean, if you don't have a social media presence, you're probably a little bit behind the times. But agribusiness, food business, even individuals have a social media account of some sort. What are you seeing as a threat for the industry?
I think social media is a very, very powerful tool, and we all should be using it to make our everyday lives a little bit easier and a little bit better, right? But honestly, I would say that I'm probably most used to talking about social media manipulation and synthetic content on social media in terms of a foreign influence type effort, where foreign actors are trying to kind of manipulate our democratic systems that we've seen in the past few years of them trying to kind of change the way people think about things through information that appears really, truly real and accurate, when in reality it's completely made up or manipulated by somebody who is trying to move forward their particular agenda. To think that couldn't be utilized in a way to harm a business or an organization would be naive, right? So maybe not at the same level as a foreign government could potentially do it, but certainly efforts could be made to try to appear like you are posting something or advertising something on behalf of a significant an organization, a company, when in reality you're not, and you're trying to get that point to harm or to sow up some negative public opinion about the organization. So just making sure that one, that you are securing access to your social media accounts and have social media teams that are trained up on these types of things, so that they know they know how to keep those things secure the same way we would try to secure all of our systems. Yeah, that's not our system. It's our access to another organization system, but it's just as important to secure that so folks can't gain access to it. And being sure that we're that we're monitoring what is going on in social media that references our organization, right? And seeing that so that you can potentially identify a mention of your company or potential fraudulent post claiming to be your organization, and then taking the appropriate action with those social media companies who will act most of the time to remove that stuff when it's fraudulent, so that you can prevent potential damage.
I think I could add, Kyle, it's on back to sort of the cybersecurity angle. It goes back to that foothold. So if a cyber criminal or even a nation state hacker, a foreign government hacker, can masquerade as someone that's interested, let's say they befriended a scientist on social media, or some kind of social platform. And it's again, at first, it's very, they do likes, like I like that publication, I like that research. Have you been to this country? And then it says, hey, here's my resume. Check out this link, right? And they send you that link, and in that link leads to a malicious attachment, and that leads to malware. That leads to a foothold on the system. So social media, from that standpoint, I think is one of our biggest risks on the cyber security angle. Is it's a possible foothold for a cyber criminal to get to that host machine. And now we're back talking about ransomware. We're talking about exfiltration of data. So that's one threat we certainly see between cyber criminals and nation state foreign government hackers.
Targeting social engineering campaigns against people is easier when you have more information on those folks, right? And so having public profiles as an individual and posting where you're at and who you work for, there's a physical security and there's a professional security piece to that. And so while it's important to be out there and making sure that folks are aware, knowing what information you have out and is public knowledge is really important when you're trying to kind of separate the real from the fake when it comes to any type of social engineering type operation, so that you can potentially prevent those things from happening, and recognizing when somebody's not who they say they are when they try to reach out to you.
So, we're coming up on time, and we've talked a lot about business email compromise, ransomware, insider threat, intellectual property, AI, social media. I mean, that's a lot of information. I know we couldn't cover everything in detail. Where can the audience go for more information about what you just shared, and maybe go more in depth with certain topics, saying, hey, what next? What else can we do?
Sure. So a lot of the documents that Tom and I mentioned throughout this, and I've plugged it a few times, I'll plug it again, are posted up at ic3.gov. So that information, anything that's not sensitive that we're able to post on the open internet, including our private industry notifications, pins that we push out to industry to identify certain threats and try to push that information out, will be posted on ic3.gov. Our public service announcements are posted there as well. That's a great place to go to get that information directly from the FBI. The other piece of it that I would say is important is to know where you can report something, and so ic3.gov is one of those places. But like Tom mentioned, if you have something that that is a potential issue that you see going on that's suspicious, reach out to the FBI. Reach out to your local field office. The phone number is right out there. If you type it in, into Google, the first place that'll pop up, as long as you have location services turned on, will be the closest FBI field office to where you are. You can pick up the phone and call. We have a cyber watch center that's responsible for intake and distribution of cyber threat information, including these types of reports that can pass that information around to the people who need it to action it when appropriate. At a very significant pace. The other thing I would say is, FBI does have a Twitter handle. The FBI does have social media presence. Follow at FBI on Twitter, because while you're going to get everything that the FBI posts, you will also get our cyber awareness messages. Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Last month, we had a series of postings that went out there with different documents that were available. And so it's a good place to go, since we're talking about social media, to follow FBI on Facebook and Twitter. Those are good platforms to see the information that we have out there.
So if I were to call the FBI and say I have something I want to report, or I have this situation, what does that kind of look like? Is that an hour-long conversation? Is this, you guys are going to show up on site and suddenly it's this whole day, or how? I mean, is kind of walk through what that would look like for your audience if they want to report something. Kind of, hey, what's the approach and what's involved?
Well, I would say as you described, Ken, you're alluding to several different scenarios there. It always depends. So if this is a historical cyber incident, as far as a cyber perspective, we would, if you call the local office, they will take that information and probably just the basics of it, and you'll get recontacted by an investigator. If it's something, so that's one way if you call the office. A lot of times people really like ic3.gov. It's been a great resource for the FBI. In that sense, it's a web portal, right? So you fill that information, you go there, it's pretty simple. You fill the information of your complaint and it walks you through. And in that instance, that information gets aggregated with FBI holdings, and you may get contacted by an investigator. Now, if you have an ongoing incident, that's different, okay? So if you're a small business, or if there's a hacker in your network at this moment, then the FBI is going to be more responsive, and we might go on scene that day even. I know here in Baltimore, we've sent people out the day of, because the hackers are in the network at that moment. We've collected evidence. We've provided context to the hackers, what they might be after, what they're going for. And the FBI, our mission is, we don't restore your networks. We pursue the adversary. So we can assist you with learning about the context of the adversary. We can help you detect the adversary. But so our role is not restoring networks. DHS CISA, that's more in their role. That's an important distinction. That's clear. Just to make folks clear, we don't come in and fix your networks. We're going after the adversary. So it's back to the first thing that someone is going to ask you is they're going to say, have you preserved those computers, right? Did you reformat those computers? If you did, it's going to be hard for us to get those artifacts, those forensic artifacts, and use that to chase the adversary. That'll be the first question is, have you preserved the computers? Have you preserved the access logs that the hacker might use? So that's what we're going to be looking for first is evidence. We're going to do everything we can to tell you about the adversary. We have cyber task force in every FBI field office. So that's made up of FBI agents. It's made up of computer scientists. It's made up of analysts. It's made up of state and local officers, analysts, oftentimes. And it's also made up of other federal agencies, federal investigators. So we don't want to pretend that the FBI solves all the problems. I've been in this for over a decade, and I can tell you it's always a team. So we rely on our partners in law enforcement. We rely on private sector partners. We rely on somebody that gives us the information as well. And also we rely on foreign partners also to pursue the adversary and disrupt the adversary. So I think another thing to think about is what the FBI will expect is that do we have got full consent from you, the victim, to get the information? So what I mean by that is there's been times where I will take a call and it'll be a systems administrator, and he'll say, we have an intrusion here, come help us. And we'll do what we can. We come out there, and between that call and when we arrive, maybe 2 hours, that they didn't fully involve the C-suite. Okay, so the CEO wasn't quite on board. The general counsel wasn't quite on board. So we really recommend thinking ahead of time of if we had a cyber incident, how would the company involve? And we really want all the players on board as we respond to incidents. I've kind of maybe went further beyond your question there, but that's just our approach.
So
that's great. Go ahead, David.
Sorry, one thing I would just add is, Tom walked us through, what happens when you call the FBI and in a response situation, it's and why are we collecting this information, right? Obviously for the purposes of pursuing the adversary. But information that's voluntarily provided by private industry is also extraordinarily important for us to be able to understand the threat better, and then in turn push that information back out to industry and push it out more broadly. And I'm not saying in a way of like, look at this company that became a victim of an attack. Our number one goal is always to protect the victim and provide those victim services. But in an anonymized format or just in a technical format of things to look for to potentially prevent your organization that we learned from a previous attack that can prevent your organization from succumbing to that same attack, or potentially even identifying something that may already be on your system that you didn't know about because those trademarks, those indicators of compromise are not known, right? And so those are the things that I mentioned, private industry notification. There are also flash reports that are more technically focused that we push out. That information is very rarely something that we pull out ourselves. That's information that's provided to us by organizations that are willing to report it so that we can use it for the broader community to protect ourselves and prevent some of these issues.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think that's one of the concerns, being in a private organization, you don't want to be embarrassed. You don't want to lose reputation. If you go to the FBI, is this going to get blasted on the news? What's going to happen? Is this confidential? Is that what I'm hearing? Is this is a situation where the company is the victim, and we do everything we can to either anonymize it or make sure it's not publicly disclosed, and that if information is shared, it's anonymized or redacted in some format. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And our FBI cyber strategy, which we publicly rolled out our new cyber strategy last year. There are two main key pieces to that I think relate to this conversation. One, the FBI's goal is to impose risk and consequences on our adversaries, and to do that, we need to partner with private industry to gather that information and be able to move forward towards those ends. And the more we can make their actions risky and potentially result in consequences being pushed upon them, then hopefully the fewer of these types of things we'll see. The other piece of that's really relevant is our goal in a response is never to blame the victim of an attack, right? To treat a victim as a victim, and we're not there to say this was done wrong or this wasn't done right. Didn't you listen to the symposium where we said to do these things? That's not our goal. Our goal is to go in there and say, okay, what information can we pull out to forward our investigation, and also to help educate other people so that these things don't continue to happen, because we do see the same things. Cyber criminals are acting in a way that they're as efficient as possible, right? So they're going to try the same thing over and over again as long as it works. We have to make it stop working, and to make it stop working, gathering that information and being able to arm everybody else with it prevents these types of things. And those are our end goals there.
That's fantastic. I'll ask one last question, and I'll wrap it up with the point that Tom just made in his previous remarks. So would the FBI ever call out of the blue and say, hey, Kyle, we think there's something going on here, or, some company, we think there's a ransomware attack or an event, you need to take action now?
So yeah, Kyle, thank you for bringing that up. That's a big part of what the FBI does. So we have ongoing investigations constantly. We work with foreign partners. We work with the U.S. intelligence community, and through all that, we come across cyber threat information of where cyber actors have an ongoing foothold in a company, in a large company, in a small business, sometimes even a very small business. And so it's very common routinely where what we do is we call it victim notification. That sounds, maybe not the most welcoming phone call. Hopefully we can pose it differently, but it's routine where we have threat information that a cyber criminal or a nation state hacker has compromised your network or is targeting your network. So both those instances, we will contact individuals about. And again, that is not adversarial at all. We're not there to gotcha, to play the getcha game. We are there to help you, and I sincerely mean that, to actually help secure your networks, to get them secure, and to find out what that adversary is doing, and back to pursuing that adversary. And what Section Chief Ring mentioned also, and I love it, is sharing that information also. It's a cornerstone of what we do. So, yep, it's a big part of what we do.
Thank you. Thank you. And glad to hear that. And I'll wrap this up. You mentioned previously about an incident where someone might have called, and between the time you arrived and they made that call, they weren't quite prepared for what to do. They hadn't socialized it with their CEO or their counsel. So I think one of the takeaways that I'm hearing in this is, from today's conversation, is that everyone needs to be prepared for one of these scenarios. I mean, whether it's ransomware, business email compromise, social media, insider threat, there's a likelihood that it's going to affect someone or some organization at some point over the next year, 2 years. If you could live long enough, if you're in the business long enough, you will probably experience some type of cyber attack. And the worst thing to do is try to figure it out when it happens rather than be prepared now. Be armed with the information that you're sharing, and basically knowing what to do when it happens, who to make a call to, who do you go to get authorization, who do you need to bring in. So you're not panicking, you're not trying to solve the issue on the fly, but you actually have a very clear path to say, hey, here's how we get out of the situation, who we contact, and how we get it solved. With that, you mentioned quite a few times on where they can go for more information. I think there's some a slick sheet or some more information they can follow up on from the website. Is there, I think we'll have opportunities to maybe take some questions, Andrew, or some others on the moderation forum, that where we can actually, if you have questions from the audience, submit those to us. We'll get them back to Dave and Tom, and maybe we can get those answers as well. So I know we couldn't cover everything, and certainly go to the website, take a look at that. And if that doesn't answer your questions, maybe we can field those back out to you. And again, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate your insight and bringing this to light. This is certainly something that I've heard so much about, and I know it's affecting the industry as a whole. I don't go a day without hearing about one of these type of attacks on some org or some customer or some vendor. So thanks again. Any closing things you want to share to the audience in our final minute here?
Hey, Kyle, we really appreciate the opportunity. We're super excited to get this message out. We're super excited to collaborate with small businesses to disrupt cyber adversaries. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. And the thing I'd say is we talk about oftentimes left a boom, right a boom type of things, and left a boom pre-attack and post-attack, and building those relationships before something happens with your organization helps you in knowing who to reach out to after the fact. So take advantage of the different programs that the FBI office in your area has, right? And so do that outreach to the office. The office will be doing the outreach as well, but it's important to have those contacts, and whether you get them directly from the FBI or through local law enforcement in your area that can then start those introductions. It's just important to have as many contacts as you can before something happens. And when you don't have those contacts, that's okay. We gave you a lot of opportunities and ways to reach out to us. So, just again, thanks so much for this opportunity to get to speak to everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk about what I think is an extremely important topic for everybody to be fully tracking on.
Absolutely. And hopefully I never have to make that call, but if I do, it sounds like I'm in good hands and people that I can trust and go to figure out how to navigate this. We're not alone, and we all have to work together as a team. So thank you so much for your time today, and all the best. Take care, and thanks for joining the CyberAg Symposium.
Thanks.
Next, still in the call, feel free to send your questions. We'll have a slick sheet posted up later. So if you can't remember the website or where to get the information, we'll go ahead and post a bulletin on the actual conference site. So you'll have a download that you can get that information from later. Thanks again so much for your time and for attending today's session. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Well done, Kyle.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. And thanks for helping to field some of those questions. That was a lot of information to share today. So understand might be overload for some folks, but it was too important not to share. Certainly there's a wide audience that still needs to get this message and understand some of those common cyber attacks. So again, tremendous thanks to the FBI for their willingness to participate and have this conversation. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I thought it went really well. I'm, as you know, I'm kind of a geek in this area, and sitting here watching the FBI talk about risk and consequences and synthetic content. I tell you what, I think if there's any Twitter aficionados out there, there's a lot of new hashtags that'll be springing from this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's pretty wild to see where the industry is going, and the attacks keep evolving. So never let your guard down. I think these talks are informative, and I expect there'll be many more to come to continue to share this message and how to protect the industry, as what really kicked this off was the FBI seeing an uptick in agriculture and manufacturing and food industries being attacked, specifically in cyber, and that, hey, that means the message is still not out there where it needs to be if we're still seeing this industry targeted, and certainly all industries are of opportunity, as we noted in the call. So not just food or manufacturing, but all of us have something that's probably valuable that we want to protect, and making sure we share this with our peers and our neighbors and families, and certainly organizations that we work at. Anything else?
Well, I was going to add, and you know, the sector that we represent, agriculture, is one of the critical infrastructure sectors for national security. So even though we might not have seen the same high-profile attacks on our industry that others have, that doesn't mean that they're not coming or they're not already there. So this is part and parcel of being aware of the risks that are out there, and then what resources and tools are available to address those when they occur.
Absolutely. Well, with that, I think we've wrapped up everything from today. So well done. What a great session. Mike, thanks for having us, and I look forward to future sessions and hearing some of the feedback.
Well, as do I. And so thanks everybody for joining us. It's been a long day since we started at 11, and we appreciate many of you sticking with us here till the end. So again, we'll probably schedule another one of these events. I don't know how soon. It'll all depend on who I can recruit for another planning committee for another session. But we really do think this has been valuable, and we hope to continue the conversation. So I'll be coming out with some additional follow-up emails to everybody. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you very much.